the artistic and scientific design of data storytelling. Welcome to this session. I'm Brendan Ng. The main objective for us to tell a compelling story is because we want to carry out effective communication and persuasive presentation to your target audience. Now, there's a different kind of data storytelling mechanism can be put in place. For example, dashboard, presentation flow, infographics, and etc. By and large, in this case, we are focusing on the professional business presentation in a boardroom setting environment. Now, with the situation here, we try to enlarge our scientific design skill set on top of analytics and suppress or downplay our artistic design skill set. Simply because data composition is meant to represent data, narrative, and visuals meant to explain, enlighten, and engage your target audience. Now, in the typical data analytics project, all the tasks can be categorized to exploratory or confirmatory phase versus explanatory phase. Now, assuming you are one of the guy at the left, you're working for the past 1 year, doing a lot of in-depth data analytics tasks meant to find the findings. Subsequently, you're tasked by your senior management to present to the board members. I'm sure that it is from very complicated idea to be represented by the simplest manner meant for data presentation. Now, with that situation, charting, graphing, mapping, and tabling are the key techniques being used to represent the data and presenting the insights. Usually, in a typical professional presentation, I would suggest 3 key graphing techniques. First one, bar graph to answer the question of what, which, who, why, how, and etc. Simply because bar graph is powerful enough to unlock the heavy weightage of the discrete data. Second, line graph. The main purpose of line graph is answering the question of when, because line graph tend to connecting the dot over the time to present the trend. The third one, geospatial map to answer the question of where, because maps are powerful enough to unlock the geographical locational information. Now, with the situation here, let's think about artistic and scientific design. A typical data presentation need to have basis of component, which is text. Text are the basic fundamental component to form words meant for graph titles, annotation, label, descriptions, and etc. Now, typical case, typeface are being derived based on artistic design concept. Example, serif versus sans serif. Looking at the A, for example, alphabet A, Times New Roman were having very contrast compared to Century Gothic. With this situation, there's a lot of features are being captured in each of the font type being derived. Example of the design aspect of a typical font type would be baseline, X height, cap height, and etc. Now, with the situation here, font always appear in a corporate font type as well. And of course, with that situation, in the professional presentation, we should adhere strictly to corporate font type meant to be used in our presentation template, dashboard, infographics, and etc. Simply because the font type meant to be used for brand communication. However, ladies and gentlemen, do you feel that, are you reporting to a very smart guy in the organization? I'm sure the answer is yes. If not, let's think about it. Why I pose this question is because there's a group of very smart guys tend to have a little bit of difficulty in reading, simply because due to the font we used. For example, In this case, we're considering of two different factors, legibility and readability of the font types. Example, Times New Roman, B and D, P and Q. Similarly for Centric Gothic as well. Those are having mirror image tend to have difficulty to be deciphered, to be analyzed by the readers. This is the first thing we talk about, text font types. The second one, colorful. Colors is way too colorful because it is way too powerful in our visual presentation. From artistic perspective, the artists love color view so much because it is a place where they find the best combination of colors from primary, secondary, all the way to the tertiary colors. On the other hand, color also portrays certain meaning from psychology perspective. For example, red color meant to portray excitement, strength, love, and energy. Now with the situation here, a lot of artists try to combine this concept from artistic perspective to derive the brand colors. Similarly for NUS ISS, we're making use of orange and blue color as our main corporate color in this context. However, ladies and gentlemen, color is not absolute value simply because it is perception. Now, what I mean by perception? Example, what's the color of this shoe? Managerial view identify it is pink and white color. However, there are some of you strongly disagree because you see it as the gray and light green. Now, this is a very strong message put across. Color is perception. Now, this is the ultimate solution. What happened to the photo on the left is the photo being edited using software. Additional color pigment being added to act as a noise to the photo. For a human being, when we see the photo using our eyeball, the message sent to our brain, some of us fail to filter the noise, causing that we understood that the photo is in gray and light green colors. However, the actuality is the color is in pink and white. Another example, from statistic perspective, illusion. You may feel that the checker A is much darker than checker B in terms of gray color tone. But if I cover the surrounding distractors, you will notice that immediately the color are similar in that sense, which is same tone of gray color. With that, the key takeaway is that we try to avoid those wide spectrum of colors to be used in our visualization. So in other words, rainbow color scheme should be put in museum because they are way too long obsolete in that sense. Next, another scientific design perspective touching the colors is color vision deficiency or color blindness. As you see from the slides, you can see that the rightmost picture illustrates the normal vision. The top right photos present a typical case of color vision deficiency. From this picture, we can see that the red and green color are very, very similar with no significant distinctive among them. However, for the rest of the color vision deficiency, all of them be able to differentiate between orange and blue color. Of course, the last one is color blindness, where we can't really help by making use of just dark black color and the white color to differentiate between the darkest to the lightest color. Now, the gist of this is that 8% to 10% of male tend to have a certain level of color vision deficiency. So in that sense, if you will need to presenting to a male reporting officer, a top management, choose color wisely. This is because due to scientific design perspective. So the key takeaway is that we try to avoid traffic light color scheme. By the way, do you know that traffic light is a serious mistake done by human being? In fact, some of the countries try to propose to making use of square, diamond, and circle on top of red, amber, green colors, simply because they noticed that there's a group of male is having difficulty to differentiate between red and green colors. With that, the key takeaway from this slide is that we try to avoid traffic light color schemes in our presentation. So these are some of the examples where we tend to make use of traffic lights color for these purposes. Example, to present sad and happy case, positive and negative. In this case, project progress. Ladies and gentlemen, some of you may involve in project management, right? Before the meeting, you tend to convert all the amber to green, some of the red into amber colors, so that it looks good on the project progress. Unfortunately, some of them not be able to recognize between red and green colors. So what the suggestion here is that to replace green color with blue color instead. The next one, of course, yes and no, similar to go or not go in the traffic light color scheme. Next one, positive or negative, where we make use of traffic light color scheme. Increment versus decrement. Red and green to orange and blue color. Always remember brand color for NUS, ISS. The colors being used simply because orange and blue color so happen complement each other in the color view from color theory perspective, from artistic design perspective. Similarly, it is so happen in line with color vision deficiency. That's why orange and blue color are always being opted as the best substitute for red and green colors. Let's take a look at some of the example. Bar graph using darkest to lightest blue color. Line graph contrast the two lines using orange and blue colors. Last but not least, geospatial map using blue and orange color. Now with that situation, you'll be able to make full use of colors and text to improve your insights presentation from data-driven storytelling perspective via proper graphical manners. Now with this situation, with everything put together, we'll be able to articulate a very good visual hierarchy. Now, the key point behind the scene of this visual hierarchy is that when you're reading a paragraph, textual description, we know how to read line by line from top left to the bottom right. Unfortunately, when you're presented with a graphic manner, particularly in this case, graph or charts or maps, the viewing patterns, it is in randomized. With the situation, let's take a look as one of the example. Can you find the bear in the forest or in the trees? You may be able to find after you search high and low, take longer time to find and kind of to certain level of certainty. However, if you push out the background using gray color, immediately the bear stand out very, very clearly. Now, this is how we should make use of gray color for background information, black color for important information. Now, in the event that you need to enlarge further the effect of the important information versus the secondary information, we can using highlighting colors. In this case, making use of purple and orange color. In fact, it can make use of orange and blue color to represent too. So with the situation in the graphical presentation, we tend to make use of gray color for background information, black color for important information, orange and blue color as complement each other for positive and negative effect, yes and no effect, male and female, and etc. So as you can see from the line graph, the thickness of the line, the tone of the gray color representing the intensity or important level of the information. Of course, the highlight will be in blue color in this context. Next one, a simple bar graph. In this case, you even further want to enlarge one of the categorical data. In this context, it is highlighted in orange color so that it will be much more distinctive compared to the rest from another aspect of it. Now, with the situation, you'll be able to improve the eye-catching effect to alert the important information, in this case, data-driven insights to your top management or your stakeholders or your users. Last but not least, example of pie chart. A lot of cases where we see pie chart tend to be colored using rainbow colors. In fact, pie chart can be improvised over time by sorting from the largest sector to the smallest sector from 12 o'clock onwards, making use of tone of color. In this case, it is pretty much on neutral manner. You can be making use of blue color. Those background information, others, for example, because it's simply due to too many information to be presented, all of them can be grouped together to be presented using gray color. The same concept apply, push the background information using gray color. So you have the contrast effect in visual hierarchy perspective. With that, I end my sharing session. Let's take a look. Any question from the audience? Now open for the audience for Q&A. Okay, this one question. How can I learn more about these topics? A very good question. In fact, in NUS ISS, we do have a course, 3 days course, data storytelling, which is offered under Data Science Practice Group in NUS ISS. So you can look for our website for more information. Another question, which font do you recommend? Now, it really depends on the situation here. Please allow me to go through the slides where I presented the font type meant to be used for presentation. Now, typically, all cases where incorporate font type, it is being derived based on artistic design. Over the time, serif is being obsolete because in the past, serif is derived based on the poor printing technology. This is why there's a lot of curvature built to differentiate the alphabets of the particular font type. Over the time, due to advancement of display technology, due to advancement of printing technology, that's why all cases where we move on to sans serif to get rid of those unnecessary curvature. As I mentioned just now, from scientific design perspective, there's a group of people with to cater for their needs, which is due to their difficulty in readings, right? So pretty much all cases where I will use centric Gothic or TW Sans MT. Whereas Comic Sans is meant to be used for a lot of preschool teachers in kindergarten and primary school because it's more lively in that sense. But if you're talking about focusing on professional presentation, and of course, I'm looking at the A, then centric Gothic and TW Sans MT can be used as a supplementary to your corporate font type. Another question, besides blue, orange, and black, gray, what other color combinations are good for presentation? It really depends on your corporate color as well. Now, typically, for example, if the corporate color is red and blue color, I will recommend to add orange in between. In the event that you want to present the severity or criticality of the information from red to orange to blue colors, right? So this can complementary colors to be implemented. Let's take a look at the brand color for NUS ISS, for example. As you can see from NUS ISS logo, it's a complementary color, right? Light blue color is complementary on top of orange and blue colors. Now, all this can be supplementary to improve the insights presentation via visual manners. There's one very quick question. Which is the most recommended tools? Tableau, Power BI, Excel, and etc. I really hope that there is no sales and marketing people from Microsoft, Power BI, Excel, etc. Now, based on the visualization perspective, Tableau is created by a group of data visualization experts. On the other hand, Power BI, Excel, which is basically Microsoft products, is created by a group of technology evangelists. Now, from this angle, you can see that both of them having their main objective. Looking at the logo of Tableau is very different from the color of Power BI. So in that sense, I would recommend, it really depends on your data and analytics functions. In the event that it's meant for presentation, I would say that all of them can be adhered to the best practices, as long as you put extra effort to improve, to configure, to change the color accordingly. By default, Power BI is flexible enough for you to change the color for each of the bars in the bar graph, for example. It's a matter for us to really put in effort to configure, to change one at a time. The same thing applies to Power BI, to Excel spreadsheet, and of course, in Tableau as well. Would you recommend animation in presentation? Depends on the setting. What I focus on just now in this session is professional presentation in boardroom setting environment. We are talking about professional presentation where it needs to be aesthetic as possible so that your target audience will focus on the crucial key points or the insights derived from the analytics. However, once you put a lot of animation, it becomes way too eye-catching. In fact, you have reverse effect in that sense. However, animation can be good choice for mechanism for presentation in conference, in public awareness campaign, and etc. Another question, is it possible to use deeper shades of colors, for example, dark green, lighter shades of red, pink, instead of orange and blue color? This really depends on the color vision deficiency level of your target audience. Now, with this situation, you may want to try to simulate this effect, making use of certain extension. For example, no coffee vision plugin in Google Chrome, you'll be able to simulate different level of color vision deficiency, including color blindness. From the angle, you'll be able to simulate how a typical person having certain level of color vision deficiency be able to see your presented materials in the most efficient manner. Another question, how do you craft your story? When we're talking about professional presentation, a lot of cases where you'll be given the agenda for the meeting. Example, board member meeting. Now with the agenda, we're supposed to craft the critical story path to replace your traditional presentation flow. Now, simply because in the past, we try to present information after information, or in another words, the graph or charts are showing data in graphical manner, which means we fail in effective and persuasive presentation via data-driven perspective. With the situation, we should be able to craft a critical story path geared towards that particular meeting environment according to the agenda. With that, we'll be able to fulfill all the questions or the insights searched by your top management, and at the same time, you'll be able to do a kind of critical information to be presented from the angle. Okay, another good question. For presentation, is it recommended to use plain white color background as compared to grayed out pictures template? It really depends on your corporate template given to you. Other cases where, due to professionalism in presentation, we try to make use of plain background because you don't want to add additional burden for those having too much information to be digested by your target audience. Having said that, again, I also not suggest to have a very white color simply because you're looking at certain projectors, it can be way too white, especially the pure white color, which having eye-cutting effect. With that situation, there are some cases where some of the corporate template tend to make use of beige color or very, very light gray color in that sense, right? So that you'll be able to improve the target audience viewing experience. Okay, another question. What are the key principles to consider when attempting to tell a story using data and visualization? I would say that everything surrounded within your target audience. There is a lot of data storytelling, or in fact, if you go back to your primary school, for example, your secondary school, when you attempted a narrative essay, there's a storytelling framework to be adhered to. Typical case, you're surrounded with your target audience, how we make use of data to derive the output. Now, again, pretty much depends on what is the agenda of the meeting. Pretty much, you try to derive the top 5 most critical questions so that be able to answer all the questions from your target audience. From there, we will be able to craft the story path according to the agenda. From all the 5 questions, it can be answered using graphical manner, 1 or 2 charts, graph or tables or maps. With that situation, you'll be able to carry out your presentation flow in a critical story path manner to put across your message from insights presentation perspective. Another question, want too much color to be distracting and jarring to audiences from the data presentation, how many colors would you recommend restricting presentations to? As I mentioned earlier on, based on the presentation, there are 4 different colors to be used. Gray color, it could be tone of gray color meant for background information, black color for important information, orange and blue color meant to highlight important information from positive, negative, yes and no, increment, decrement perspective. It's where you want to contrast the 2 information based on orange and blue color. However, for some of the corporate environment, you may want to find 3rd complementary color, for example, red, orange, and blue color to portray the different level of intensity of the information from criticality point of view. What is the best way to tell you just that a chart is interactive? Now, in terms of interactivity, typically we try to capture this kind of graph presentation in dashboard, because in dashboard, it tends to be used by your target audience and the office environment meant for self-help platform. We can't afford to make use of dashboard to do live presentation, simply because it's way too overwhelming in terms of information, in terms of data. Now, in the traditional business intelligence meant for reporting and dashboarding perspective, we always adhere to 5 rights. The right info, to the right person, at the right time, right quantity, and the right quality. In fact, I'll add one more, at the right place. Because when you do live presentation in the boardroom setting environment, it's very, very different from you to do your debrief to your team, or even presenting via dashboard for operational perspective. With different setting, different environment, all this will need to cater the needs for using different data storytelling mechanism. Okay, there's another quick question. What's the key differences between data visualization and data storytelling? Please allow me to go through one of the key components in data storytelling. Traditionally, a lot of data are being dressed up using graphical presentation. Now, it's because we're presenting the data or showing the data in a slightly different manner, that's all. Without injecting narrative, more importantly, live presentation, verbal narrative is very, very crucial. Now, in the situation here, you tend to showing data in graphical manner. It is lacking of convincing voice. Ladies and gentlemen, believe me, when people look at numbers, look at the statistics, we forget the next moment. Because numbers and statistics trigger your mind to think further, that's all. On the other hand, narrative is where we tell a compelling story via critical story path. Verbal narrative touches your heart. You feel for that. Engaging your target audience, emotion, expect. With this combination, we'll be able to tell a good data visualization and storytelling. Okay, another question, somewhat similar to the earlier one. Is it relevant to use animation in presentation? I would say no, because when you're looking at the professional presentation, it is need to be aesthetic as possible because you're presenting the key information. However, you're presenting to a group of middle management, we need more information. With that situation, you may need to do some kind of animation to tell the whole story. So it really depends on which level, which user are you presenting to in that sense? Another question, what is the estimate maximum amount of explanatory word or sentence per slide could I insert to still ensure effectiveness? In a typical graphical presentation, it could be because due to the first slides, due to introduction, background setting, context before content, or even last slides or conclusion in words perspective, the rest should be pretty much in graphical presentation, which means the font to be used is meant to label the important information and notation, actionable title, descriptive, described by your subtitles, and etc. Which means we should avoid from composing sentences in your presentation. It should be powerful key words in that sense. Okay, there's another question I mentioned earlier on as well. How about background slide color? Besides white, what are the other recommended options? It really depends on, as I mentioned earlier on, another question as well. It really depends on the setting in your presentation ambient. In the event that the projector is way too bright in that sense, we can't afford to make use of pure white because it tends to have eye-cutting effect. With that situation, we tend to make use of lightest gray as a background or even beige color to ease the reading experience by your user and for the visual perspective as well. Okay, another good question. Using a critical story path structure requires a linear narrative. What if the story is non-linear? What should the presentation be structured? It is really depends on the critical story path. In fact, critical story path may or may not be linear by nature, simply because all the cases where you are there, you're the key person to drive through the entire presentation. You're the one to guide your user what you want them to hear and listen to you. With the situation, we guided with these slides. With your powerful, convincing voice via verbal narrative, you'll be able to guide them through from non-linear or linear perspective, what is the most important insights to be presented to them. However, one key note, a lot of cases where we tend to flip through the slides from first to the last, go back again, vice versa, which is not very, very recommended because it will distort or distract your target audience focus point in terms of focusing the right story path in that sense for presentation perspective. Another question, for interactive dashboard visualization, what are the best practice? Like make the background gray, zoom in, change to a different color, and etc. There is a list of best practices or checklist to derive a good dashboard. But simply because due to the graphical presentation, all these are graphical manners. The same concept will be applied in dashboard as well. But in different setting, we do to see that some of the dashboard tend to have a dark background with lighter font type, font colors. Now, if you're looking at the psychology perspective, in fact, there's one research mentioned, human beings tend to read much better using bright font color, dark background. However, it doesn't pick up because if this is going to implement it in publication industry, all the publisher will bankrupt because they're printing background instead of the font. With that situation here, the similar concept apply in some of the dashboard. It depends on the whose target audience. Are they from the top management, middle management, or operational level? From strategic, tactical, operational, or even educational level, they're having different objective, making use of your dashboard for certain purposes. Example, those are working for the educational operational, for investment, for example. They need to have very eye-catching effect, alert, blinking effect to alert them regarding the fluctuation of the stock market prices. On the other hand, your top management are looking for a very serious information meant for their strategic plan. They're looking at the past 5 years of data to portray next 2 years of profitability concern. With that situation, I would suggest, as clean as possible, these are the top management looking at the very high-level information, yet static, professional in that sense. Okay, there's another very interesting question. Is it recommended to add quizzes and other activities during the story path to engage the audience? It is yes when you're engaging the public, for example, meant for public speaking session, campaign awareness, live web version. Now, this will be more into the infographics perspective, where you try to downplay the scientific design, enlarge the artistic design, because you are portray or kind of presenting language information in the more fun and memorable environment as compared to your serious presentation in the corporate environment. Another question, what's the ideal time frame for a presentation? I would say the time frame is given by your management for your presentation, but unfortunately, a lot of cases where my take is that when we go through a lot of corporate training, we notice that you are always given limited time, limited slides, yet ample of information to be presented. With that situation, a lot of cases where in the real world corporate environment, a lot of people tend to condense 4 graphs into 1 slide, which is very unhealthy because they're given the constraint of number of slides. So one other way my participant suggested in the class is that they will make use of an animation. It's 1 slide, but it's 4 clicks with 4 graphs to be presented in that sense. Now, this is one way, the trick is can play with. However, if you're talking about a very serious presentation to the top management, I would feel that you need to wow them within 10 seconds. After that, they straight away going to another channel, swipe through their WhatsApp, replying email, and etc. Now, with the situation here, it's very important for you to exercise your verbal narrative in the live presentation, make full use of the very precious airtime to convince them to some extent of your information. Okay. Now, in conclusion, we have done effective presentation, persuasive presentation in our working professional environment. However, it's a crucial component, which is verbal narrative need to be injected to improve the power of your presentation. I would say that you are there to convince your target audience, not to con them or not to confuse them further, because with data-driven, it is factual statement. Otherwise, you will be categorized as another person with another opinion. All right, so this is the digitalization journey we go through in a typical corporate environment. Last but not least, there's another one question. How would you recommend the layout for dashboard to be like, so as to keep it simple and can be read at one glance, but still contain tons of information? So with the situation, I would say that first thing, the layout of the entire dashboard. Slide by slide is easier for us because we control within one graph per slide. The flow of the presentation is based on our presentation flow, which is critical story path we identified earlier. However, when you put more than 5 graphs or charts into one dashboard, you have to make full use of the same concept applied here, visual hierarchy, and arrange accordingly. I would say it will be in zigzag form or the golden triangle. The top leftmost is the most important estate, premium estate, for you to capture the most important information, and the rest to be used for supplementary information. So with that, you can reorientate your user to read through your charts, graph, tables, or maps in a typical dashboard setting. With that, I think that's all from the question from audience. If not, thank you for your attention. Do stay with us again. Thank you.